And to enforce any contract, you need to know what type of service was delivered. Was it delivered at the conditions that was promised? In order to do any of that, you need a global agreement that, okay, this was...
Especially if those contracts are smart contracts, meaning that the state, the information about the state of the DP network needs to be somehow committed on-chain for the smart contract to be able to use this data and mediate some disputes.
Exactly.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning back into the Bare Metal Podcast. This is your trusty Ship the Code from Rockwax Labs, and here today I've got here with me Ranvir from Witness Chain, a very exciting project that's out right now. Welcome.
Hi Martin, pleasure to be here. Everyone, I'm Ranvir. I'm the co-founder CEO of Witness Chain. We started Witness Chain around 3 years ago. Before that, I was doing my PhD with my co-founder as my PhD advisor from Vishwanath. We were working on all problems related to blockchains, solving the blockchain trilemma. And this importance of coordination in blockchain has been embedded in my thought process throughout. And what we saw was, blockchains, the permissionless coordination that blockchains enable is really powerful, but very constrained to the digital world. We want to expand it to the physical world. And that's where we started Witness Chain, and that's what we've been building. Happy to discuss what we do during this.
So high level, could you give us sort of like a 10,000-foot view of what Witness Chain is or what service it provides?
Sure. So Witness Chain is what we would call a coordination layer for physical infrastructure networks. Just like, there's Ethereum, which coordinates through the trust and consent by the trust enabled by consensus protocols. Ethereum enables coordination across smart contracts. These are typical digital entities. And just like EigenLayer enables this across like AVSs, we enable coordination across anything in the physical world. And the way we enable that is by enabling what we call consensus on physical state. So it's an agreement, verifiable agreement about properties of physical assets. And these properties of physical assets, such as the location, bandwidth, compute, and so on, can be used to build applications on top to verify.
So why does physical infrastructure need sort of proofs or cryptocurrency? Like, what would be the use case? I mean, if it's a physical computer, it's already located somewhere, it's doing some work. What sort of attestations and who is going to use these attestations? Can you give us some idea about the potential outcomes of using Witness Chain?
Definitely. So, physical infrastructure networks are a perfect use case for the decentralization ethos because they are inherently decentralized. Now, there's this new paradigm which was developed over the past. Actually, its Deepens are pretty old, but it started in the blockchain sphere a few years ago. And what essentially it enables is it enables you to incentivize a network deployment. Right. Now, once you tie incentives to a network deployment, there are a few attributes you need for your network deployment, which is like where you are located, how much you are performing, what capacity you are providing.
Service level, right?
Exactly, right. And when you want to enable these kind of incentives, you want to make sure that your rewards are given out in a fair manner. Because otherwise, people will start gaming, and this has been observed in a lot of, historically observed in a lot of Deepens, and has been a blocker to really bootstrapping both the supply and demand. Because once you get a false claim on like what capacity you have, it cannot be used by somebody down the line. It cannot be, you don't have fair rewards given out to your ecosystem partners.
It reduces the value of the protocol because the protocol isn't actually providing the service it has promised.
Exactly. Now, it's not just limited to, bootstrapping your supply and demand. There can be potential for a lot of applications to be built out of physical infrastructure. So let's say when you use AWS, you sign a SLA with AWS, which says that if I should get this amount of service. If I don't get this amount of service, I'll be repaid certain amount. And these are essentially legal agreements that can be enforced through the legal system. Now, And that's what incentivizes AWS to actually perform well, provide you the service that it promised you. Now, in order for Deepens to reach that level, they need these kind of agreements. They need enforceable contracts. And to enforce any contract, you need to know what type of service was delivered. Was it delivered at the conditions that it was promised? In order to do any of that, you need a global agreement that, okay, this was...
Especially if those contracts are smart contracts, meaning that the state, the information about the state of the DP network needs to be somehow committed on-chain for the smart contract to be able to use this data and mediate some disputes.
Exactly. So what we see right now is, and when we started, it's been the same, is Deepens are a bit siloed. So like all this thing about blockchains, like the tokens existed before blockchains, right? So they existed in the form of your credit card points or airline miles. And if you trust United, if you're a loyal member of United, yeah, you trust what United Airlines says about its miles, but you cannot do anything on top of that. You cannot build smart contracts that exchanged United Airline miles for something else because there's a single point of trust. What blockchains enabled is through this trust layer, it enabled anybody to develop anything on top of smart contract, a token, and that led to this whole builder economy and this huge $3 trillion market. It was powered by applications built by third parties who don't need to trust one another because there is a fundamental trust layer enabled by blockchains. We want to do the same for physical infrastructure networks, where you want to open up these silos. You want to enable, through this trust layer. This trust layer validates physical attributes because it's tied to physical infrastructure. Once this trust layer is built, different Deepens can coordinate with one another, but more importantly, they can coordinate with builders. You can build financial applications on top of physical infrastructure. Somebody can build an app that that creates a supply chain across physical infrastructure. So let's say you want to use some AI app, right? Now, an AI pipeline involves a lot of physical infrastructure. It involves data collection, it involves data transport, which is communication, it involves processing, GPUs, it involves storage, and so on. You want to coordinate multiple service providers together, and if you want to coordinate these providers together, you need to trust each of these, whatever each of these providers say. And a trust layer, a shared trust layer enables that.
Right. I keep thinking when you say AI in collection of data, right? Well, so there are strict data rules, for example, in the European Union. So actually attestation to the fact that the data is located in the EU is critical to avoid some legal exposure or some difficulties that could come out of that. So that's sort of making sense to me in the looking at this from the direction of making sure each of my suppliers is keeping up to the SLAs that we agreed on and is not necessarily exposing me to any risk. So let's move to. So it's an interesting use case. Maybe we'll go into some specific down the line. But I'm interested now in sort of like a big picture view. How is this accomplished? Like what with this chain, the protocol involves multiple parties that somehow have to come together to sort of detect the state of the real world, and then somehow get it on chain, right? So that sounds like a pretty complicated process. So can you take us through it?
Sure. So when you think about state of the physical world, a physical asset has multiple attributes associated with it. So these attributes can be, an example of this attribute is location, which is true for any physical infrastructure. It can also be compute, storage,
Energy
bandwidth,
consumption, whatever, right.
energy consumption, and so on. Each of these data mining or achieving consensus on each of these attributes requires novel consensus protocol. So we have built out over the past 3 years consensus protocols for key physical attributes, which is proof of location, proof of bandwidth, proof of diligence, which is a proof of compute in some sorts, and so on. Now what we have built out, the system looks like this. So there are deepens. I think of this in 3 layers. Okay, so there are deepens at the very top layer. These deepens can run on their own chain. They can run on whatever ledger of their choice, but they register their physical assets with us. Now, once registered, their physical assets sit on what is called a deepen coordination layer, which is the core part of in our stack. Now, deepen coordination layer is a layer where these registers assets sit, and once they sit there, their attributes get validated by a watchtower network. So at the very bottom is the watchtower network. Watchtower network are a set of nodes which act as validators for our consensus protocols. So they run the validation code for proof of location, proof of bandwidth, all of the proofs within our system. And the registered asset act as provers. So they have to prove their physical attributes through this set of validators. And once they prove their attributes, a certificate is generated that sits on a deepen coordination layer. And then the asset is considered a validated asset. Any service flow through that is now validated. And then people can build applications on top of this validated asset. You can build applications like the ones that we mentioned, a distribution.
I'm curious right off the bat, what sort of integration effort is required to bring in like a new deepen? Assuming, let's say they use they're interested in the attributes you guys have already implemented, right? Let's assume for the sake of example, it's just location. Do I need to do something special if I want to have my resources, proved? If I want their location to be proved, do I need to integrate some sort of sidecar, or some code, some SDK? What happens there?
Sure. So what you have to, the whole system on a moving one level deeper, consists of challengers and provers. Each of these are containers, pretty lightweight containers, I would say, for most of these proofs that sit on the watchtower network, and the prover container sits on the deepen asset. So if a deepen wants to participate in our protocol, their assets, be it their radios, their compute servers, storage servers, have to run a very small container, which is a prover for, let's say, proof of location. Now, in case of proof of location, the prover and challengers both are very lightweight. So it essentially involves doing some sort of cryptographic pings with the watchtower network. So very lightweight, but it's just a container that plugs in, that can be installed on your deepen asset. On the watchtower side, as well, it's a pretty lightweight operation. You install this container for challengers, and it will act as a validator to that physical asset. Now, both of these provers and challengers are coordinated through a challenge coordinator, which is a decentralized service on its own that we run. The coordinator matches which challengers are required, which watchtowers are required for what provers.
Is there some sort of parameter? I'm imagining in my head, for different use cases, I might want to prove the location every day, but for others, it's fine once a month, right? So do you guys have some sort of, parameter space in mind of how this stuff is intended to work for these various domains?
It's a great question. So it's a very configurable system. So to go into a bit more detail, the coordination layer, there are configurations at various layers. So on the deepen coordination layer itself, it has multiple such proofs, but it also has a module called pluggable proof of X. So what we have seen is, the deepen space is very diverse. All of them want to use this fundamental things like proof of location, but a deepen can have its own use case. So there can be a deepen which is doing just energy. There's a deepen which is just doing storage, and they might need specialized proofs for that. The pluggable proof of X module enables any deepen to integrate its system within our protocol, which will then utilize the shared security provided by the watchtower network, and it can be used downstream by multiple deepens down the line. So a proof system.
That's interesting. So in that case, the property is in some sense specific to the deepen, right? It's not like it doesn't have a general abstract name like location, which then is, location is valid for any type of resource, right? But if let's say I'm an energy producer and I introduce a new proof, which is like kilowatts generated or kilowatt hours built. So then I could have, you guys could have a taxonomy of these, many different deepens providing different ways to prove energy production, which would be then consumed individually by those smart contracts, not necessarily be interchangeable. are you thinking of it this way? It's permissionless. Everybody can sort of add their stuff, or like, would you curate like, okay, proof of energy constructed is this, and then provers have to somehow plug into it, but it's like one abstract object?
So that's an interesting question. At the very start, we are doing this. We want to make this permissionless as time goes on. But at the very start, we are making this like we are ourselves like auditing what we're putting in the system. Like whenever we collaborate with a deepen, we make sure that it's Byzantine fault tolerant. It's not making statements incorrect statements. But in the future, this will be completely permissionless in the sense that that's where the configuration on the other side comes in. So as a deepen, you can choose what proof system you want to be part of. So you can provide a proof of location, depending on the use case, right? So if it's a wireless deepen, it wants to participate in proof of location, proof of bandwidth. If it's a energy deepen, it has to do proof of location, proof of energy. So it's up to the deepen to choose what it wants to enroll into, and it can make a choice based on whatever its requirements are. On the other side, there is also like there will be applications built on top of these attributes. So let's say there is an application which is like a commodities futures exchange, but for smart commodities like bandwidth or compute. So let's say you're making an energy futures exchange. Well, an energy futures exchange would require you to determine if a particular entity which is selling that future has the capacity to sell that future and will deliver those goods as time goes on. Now, verifying that that actually happened is critical for this use case because now there's real money involved between parties which are not exactly tied to that deepen. Well, in that case, the smart contract itself will necessitate that, okay, we need proof of location and proof of energy for a deepen to participate in our protocol. And in that case, they have to that introduces a market-forced choice on the deepen to enroll into these two attributes. Or the deepen may not enroll, but a physical asset which wants to participate in this network will enroll into that proof system. So it's a choice to the deepen and the application what proof systems they want to use that makes sense from a business point of view for their use case. And then the next level of configuration is on the watchtower network, where a watchtower can choose which kind of proof system it wants to be part of. It can be part of all proof systems. The more proof system you're part of, the more validation you're doing. But it's not, we don't enforce a constraint that they have to do everything at the same time. So it's all free market at this point. But till there is market, till there is awareness in the market about what a BFT consensus on physical state means, we will be we'll only enroll protocols by doing audits and everything ourselves to make sure it's making real statements.
Yeah, my head's spinning around here with these. Oh, yeah, right. Obviously, sort of ultimately the proof system, or even the, let's say, diligence level of the proof or the quality of the proof will have to be matched to the application, right? Because it's going to be more expensive to generate more credible proofs, but then you need this higher level use case which is able to pay more for these proofs. So there'll be some sort of also segmentation or segregation along these sort of quality or assurance levels on these proofs, where you can get a cheap proof of location from 2 watchtowers, but if you require 50, it's going to be likely more expensive or different. So there's this service level type aspect again, right, on the right inside the.
Exactly. If you're it all ties back to what level of security your application requires. There's a core security which is required for a deepen to bootstrap itself, make sure it's fair rewards. But let's say you're building on we work with some deepens which are actually supply chain monitors for the actual goods supply chain. Now that's a $10 trillion economy, and let's say somebody wants to implement an insurance contract for a container delivery. Now, the data which is generated through the deepen is used to insure goods of very high value. And in that case, they would need very
extremely high assurance on the
extremely high insurance.
Yeah. Right. That's a good example. Like if a smart contract pays out on insurance because the container wasn't shipped on time or hasn't reached the destination, and there's goods, there are goods 1 to 5 to $10 million worth in the container, then right, you need an absolutely different level. I mean, can we take a step back, because we've touched on like many interesting aspects, but I'm lacking this high level map. So there's these we've talked about the deepens, we've talked about the watchtowers, the teams, I guess, that operate these watchtowers, right? So those are going to be similar teams to validator teams right now. They're going to be running some hardware that performs some extra functions. Like they'll need to take care of like network latency and stuff like this if you're talking about doing pings to a certain location. But what other players are in the system? Sorry?
Yeah, so they don't need to the hardware requirements on our we adapt. The consensus protocols are designed in such a way that they adapt to whatever latency requirements or that the operator has. You don't need additional. These things are so lightweight you can run it on a mobile phone, so it adapts itself to the configuration
to the environment. But I was thinking, so who's incentivized to sort of build these proofs, new proof systems out, right? Do you expect it to come from the dApps that are like, I want to build a commodity market, but I don't see a proof, that would be useful for me, so I'm going to go make a new one? Or are there entirely different entities? Let's go around this table of who is sitting at the protocol on the round table. Who else haven't we talked about in terms of actors?
Yeah, so there is if you want to talk about how the market dynamics work here, let's say there is the entity incentivized to develop these proof system is kind of an entity which will benefit from this proof system. So let's say there exists some generalized, let's say, a financial marketplace for physical infrastructure that needs certain attributes from its commodities. So because we talked about the futures exchange, let me continue that further. So let's say somebody is developing a generalized futures exchange. And now this is, let's say, a futures exchange that was generated which was used for energy, but now they want to expand to compute. They want to make sure that you can sell futures on GPUs, for example. But in that case, this exchange will be a demand generator for a deepen, which is specializing in the GPU space. So if you're a GPU deepen and you want to generate demand for whatever service you're selling, you can, in fact, if you can sell a future on the futures exchange, well, that's a pretty good use case for your deepen. You don't need to care about how those futures are going to be used, because there are other entities taking care of that. Now, having a lack of this proof of GPU compute is a blocker for you to participate in that exchange. That's a necessary part if you want to participate. But in that case, that deepen itself is incentivized to develop this proof and put this in the shared platform so that it can be used by that exchange. Now, how this deal would be structured is, it also profits the commodities exchange to have such proofs out there. It also profits the deepens to have such proofs out there. And it also profits us to have it, our network to have it out there, because it's an additional source of revenue. How this exact deal would be structured is dependent on the market conditions at that point. And since this is a completely permissionless protocol, in the future with very limited whitelisting requirements, we will leave it up to the market, to whoever deploys it. But it's our, since we are running this at this point, deployment would be done with the help of our team.
So where is Witness Chain as a project focused right now? Are you guys expanding especially on the types of proofs, or are you looking for connecting with app builders? Is it deepens that you're sourcing to understand more of the use cases? What's your CTA now, or what is it you guys are focused on most?
Yeah, so I would like to classify our community. We're now an ecosystem player. We classify our ecosystem into 3 parts. One is the operator restaker community, which is critical to provide this crypto-economic security to power this whole system. The second part is deepens, who participate with us, and the third part is builders who build applications on top. Uh, now to give you our current status, we launched on mainnet around 2 months ago as a launch partner to EigenLayer, and we are the leading AVS on EigenLayer with more than $9 billion of crypto economic security. But we always, the use cases that we envision on the system are huge. Like physical infrastructure in general is huge, and this is an unlocked physical infrastructure. So we are always in need for more, for expanding our watchtower network. So we're definitely looking at expanding the network itself. In fact, we will be launching an app soon, which enables anybody with a phone to run a watchtower node for like proof of location and proof of bandwidth.
Interested, is the network of operators we have discussed this somehow limited in numbers? Or is this, open and the more the better? Like, how is your protocol structured? Are there any limits to the number of watchtowers you can have?
So the system, the proofs that we have right now scale linearly with the number of watchtower nodes. So the more nodes we have, this is a good feature. This is a very distinctive feature from typical consensus protocols like proof of what blockchains use is proof of location and proof of bandwidth scale linearly with the number of nodes. So the more nodes you have, the more capacity you have to the system. And that's why we are working towards like expanding that number of nodes as well. It also leads to more decentralization, which is good in this space. Right? On the deepen side, we are what we have observed is a lot of deepens are interested in like proof of location and bandwidth. So we are enrolling deepens within our system so that they can participate. But we are also partnering. It's not just shared security that we provide to deepens. We are partnering with other deepens that are deploying their proofs on our platform. So we already started doing that. We'll release details about that in the future. In fact, we have some partnerships where like deepens are developing their own clients for use in proof of bandwidth. So for example, in proof of bandwidth, we now have we will soon have two separate clients that can interoperate with one another. So we're already seeing client diversity, community-oriented client diversity on our proof system. And on the other side, we are looking at applications, builders that can build applications on top. As a coordination layer, we would like to find applications for, the more dimensions you have in this ecosystem, the more use cases you can find. And what we have seen right now is, there is a application called, which is doing on-chain compliance. It's called Ethos. And they'll be utilizing proof of location for their compliance needs. And this proof of location is indeed generated through us and another partner, Deepen, which is called Geoordinate, which is utilizing their 6,000 miners to contribute to our proof of location system. So proof of location generated through one Deepen is now consumed by an application which has little to do with Deepens at this point. And what we are looking for right now is like these kind of synergies which will be generated the bigger network, the bigger the network goes.
What are you guys expecting to happen, 3, 4, 5 years? Let's say you're on mainnet, you've built up your library, let's say, or your catalog of different types of proofs you've discovered, like say 5, 10 new types of things that want to be proved, like amount of memory in my GPU card so I don't block model computation or, whatever comes out of as important. What's the world going to be like, when Witness Chain is active and operating? Like, can you paint us a picture?
Sure. So what I'm most excited about are the use cases that this will generate. One use case that we are getting a lot of, that we see a lot of demand for is this use case called infrastructure guild, which enables different entities to speculate on the revenue generated by a physical asset and different entities to actually go and deploy a physical asset. So what has happened in Deepens right now is you require somebody to be into Deepens, into like DIY, deploying their own hardware on the rooftop, and somebody who is also into crypto, which is a small target market. Once you enable this trust layer, you expand this market significantly. So you don't have to be into crypto and speculation to deploy this piece of infrastructure. You can actually deploy it and sell any revenue that it generates to the speculator who actually paid for this deployment. We're looking
right.
forward
So that's
to.
why I was wondering how that would work. So the speculator says, "Oh, I think if you ran a node of type X in southern France, I think this would make money. So I'm willing to I'll buy your future yield, and I'll pay you an
Exactly.
upfront cost to actually do the deployment." So you're separating sort of this is like network planning and build out from the actual realization.
Exactly. I'm a speculator. I don't live in southern France, so I can't deploy it. But yeah, but I can still invest in a future yield of that physical asset. So that would see a lot of very core
Interesting.
expansion, bootstrap of these infrastructure networks. Another example that I listed out is we would like to see futures market develop. We would also see borrow lending protocols where you can use physical infrastructure and any future yield generated by that infrastructure as a collateral to borrow funds. In traditional finance, you can use your existing deployed infrastructure as collateral, but you can't do it in Deepens. So we're going to change that. But that's immediately down the line. So that's something that we will see in towards Q3 or Q4 of this year.
Mm-hmm.
But what I envision seeing 5 years down the line is something where there is you want to represent the whole world on chain. Any disturbance in the real world, any information that you can gather from the real world, in fact, attest to something in the real world. So, right now we are talking about all infrastructure which is smart, right? But once you trust that smart infrastructure, you can trust any data generated by that smart infrastructure. And that data can be used to learn things about the world, about dumb infrastructure. This is infrastructure which is think about.
You can have proof of weather. You can have
You can have
proof of
you can have
amount of sunshine in some locations. So you can then compare whether that solar farm is broken or whether it's actually manufacturing the right amount of electricity. I can see many different ways
exactly.
you can
You can
set
have
experiments.
markets let's say I want to set up a hydroelectric dam here or a solar farm here, and then I'm exposed to weather fluctuations. And how do you know whether the weather fluctuations are actually accurate? Well, you can there's a weather deepen out there that's going to observe that and use it.
Well, it sounds super interesting. I think that was a lot of information. This is quite dense, so we'll allow the listeners to sort of digest this a little bit. Where can people find more information about Witness Chain? What's the ideal place to be? Are there Medium posts they should read, or do you guys have should start at the website or start on Twitter?
Yeah, so I would direct the viewers to our Twitter where we post regular updates. It's @WitnessChain. We also have a website, witnesschain.com, where you can look at our current status. And we recently launched a forum called forum.witnesschain.com, which we're trying to develop as an equivalent of ETH research, but for physical infrastructure. So you can see various deepen improvement proposals over there. They will be posting in very soon. And it's more of a community forum where people can go and post how they can improve physical infrastructure.
Perfect.
So
Well, thanks very much for coming on, and best of luck.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure talking.